Welcome back to a Slice of Empathy podcast. In today's episode, we're speaking with Dr. Liz Jenkins, who helps couples reconnect, repair, and reignite their love. She is a marriage and family therapist and certified connection coach with over 75,000 of focused time working on women and couples, and she is a trusted expert who quickly identifies each couple's and individual's unique path for success in their self-love and relationships. We're excited to get to learn more about you and your background, so we're ready.
Awesome.
So we'll just go ahead and dive right in. Can you maybe start off with telling us maybe some of the common challenges that couples face when trying to reignite the spark in their relationship, especially after many years of marriage?
Oh, yes. Well, there's so many, right? Because part of, I would say, the wonderful side about being together for so many years is that you've got this routine and you've got this, who does the laundry and who takes out the trash kind of thing. And so there's a level of, I want to say, predictability in the relationship with long-term, even successful relationships. But with that predictability or comfort, what sometimes happens is we start to take each other for granted. We maybe get into ruts. I mean, it's hard to see ourselves or see our spouse or our partner outside of that preconceived idea of just exactly what I can expect with them. And also, really, it's kind of funny is that people say it, but we forget our manners. When we start to spend this time together, some of the pleases and the thank yous and that consideration do sort of drop to the wayside. And it's part of the beginning of this slide that when we're looking at reconnecting, we need to get back to some of those earlier curiosities, unpredictabilities, and definitely our manners.
That is so true. And even in my own relationship, I've been with my husband almost 18 years now, actually to this particular day. And
Yay.
And our actual anniversary is on the 10th, but we got together years before. So yeah, we've been together 18 years. It's crazy, but I know what you mean, because it's like over the years, especially as you get acclimated and you live together, and you really have to stop and kind of remind yourself, to show that gratitude and to show that appreciation. Because otherwise, yeah, like you said, it's just kind of falls by the wayside, and you're like, okay, like I really, it's not that I don't appreciate like what they did for me. It's that I need to make more of a conscious effort to, be like, I really appreciate that you did X, Y, and Z, or that you took care of the dishes, or that you went tonight, or whatever it is. So I definitely understand that.
Yeah. And I've had some folks kind of push back on it, and they'll say, well, that's what they're supposed to do, right? They're supposed to do, or I expect that, or that's what they've always done. I'm like, okay, one, that's wonderful that it's so much of this, I would say, confidence that they're going to follow through with it, that you don't even have to think twice about it. But the other part of it is just those simple considerations. In fact, I had one gentleman, and if I can share a little quick story.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. He traveled, and so he was regional. And so he would drive maybe an hour to 2 hours sometimes to these sites where he did sales, or he would check on basically the performance of that site. And so he set up lots of meetings with them. But when he's coming home, he had his wife and his kids sort of like on hold. He didn't realize that, but in chatting to some of the resentments and frustrations that she was experiencing and was expressing, is that he didn't seem receptive to the fact that she didn't know his whereabouts throughout the day. So in his mind, he was framing up like, look, I'm busy. I'm out there working. I'm not doing anything wrong. But at the same time, she's here at the house saying, yes, but I've got the kids who are hungry and they haven't seen you all day, and they would like to see you. We'd like to have family dinner. That was one of her priority needs, a family dinner. So it would help if I knew when you're coming and going. So to take it out of that marriage framework or story, I said, so when you're on the road and you get tied up with traffic and you've got still another, hour 20 minutes and you're going to be running, at least 10, 15 minutes late. Do you just keep that site waiting for you or you do something different? And he says, oh my gosh, no, I've texted them and I let them know, or I'll make a quick call and say, hey, I'm running late. I'll be there in about 20 minutes. Ah, okay. And I said, so let's say you're running late, finishing up a sales and you're on your way home. How does your family know that you're on the road or that something happened? You can kind of see where I was going with that. And when he was able to match up that same consideration and not control, but just a heads up, I'm going to be 20 minutes later. So I was going to be home at 5:30, but it's going to be more like 6. So go ahead and start the kids. Or he started to see that and he appreciated what he wasn't doing for his wife and his kids. So he dialed that back and they were back on with just showing consideration for each other. And
yeah, I like that you mentioned that example because my husband is like, he's great with pretty much like even if he's out running an errand or whatever it is he's doing, he'll let me know sometimes like his location or maybe if he's going to stop somewhere else.
Yeah.
He'll let me know. Me, on the other hand, like I honestly, I don't really think about it too often. And I don't know if it bugs him. If it does, he's never said anything. But like, yeah, like sometimes like I don't know, stop and make a few errands like on the way home from work or something like that. And I don't really think to be like, okay, I'm going to go here and there unless like I need to ask him like if he needs something in particular. But actually got me thinking like he's really good about that. But like me, on the other hand, like it requires a little bit more conscious effort on my half to think about, hey, I'm going to be stopping here or there, or just like heads up. And sometimes it's just like, depending on whose night it is to cook, like it might be helpful for him if I'm going to be coming back sooner or coming back later. So
yeah,
he said it's like helps him kind of know when to get started on the food, which is helpful. So yeah, I appreciate that.
That's okay. Well, that's good. Well, this is not a bad thing. What it is you had an aha, and it says this opens up an area of conversation for the two of you. You can say, hey, I was just realizing it. You're really helpful about it. It's not control. A lot of people get like, I'm not their mother or they're not my father or whatever it might be. So that has nothing to do. It's called consideration and respect for each other. And I realized that you're really good on that. You get an A+, gold stars of just letting me know where you are and how are things going. So I never have to worry. And because I've never had to worry about it, I didn't even realize that I'm not doing that. I'm not showing that same heads up. I'm not pulled over, with my car not working on the side of the road type of thing. And see what he wants or needs. There are some people that say, hey, it's cool. It's no biggie. There's others that might say, oh, thank you. I didn't think about that, but that would be nice. Let's say if you're going to go out to work and then you're on your way home, but you're swinging by, just say, hey, I'm running some errands, or that's cool, or could you start dinner for me or get something out and defrost, whatever it might be. You guys get to have that conversation and bring that out. And that's what the early years of relationships are about. We start to do things our old way, and then we're with somebody that does things a different way. So ideally, we have those kind of conversations and we work on mapping out what works for both people.
That's so true. And I love that you mentioned that because I feel like it's definitely not like a one size fits all. I think each couple is unique and has different needs. And I know for me, it's funny, like the kind of like back in the day, like my husband would maybe like go to the grocery store, and not necessarily that I need him to tell me like where he's going all the time, but I'm like, man, like he used to like not tell me. I'm like, oh man, I really needed milk or something. And you were just there. And I'm like, now I have to make a whole separate trip. And so there was a little bit of a conversation like, okay, can you let me know, like, if you're stopping by the store, just in case I need like one thing that maybe like, I don't want to make an extra trip for, but if you happen to be there or something like that, and so that's also like, that's been really helpful for us as well.
Okay. And see, that's a win. That is a success. You guys are a successful long-term couple that is still navigating and renegotiating things as your life evolves. it's very different. I mean, at least for me, we've been together for a long time, 36 years married. And it's different than when it's two people that are running around, maybe in an apartment or in a home, and they start adding other things in. Like for us, we added dogs and cats in first and then kids. And having that kind of ability to be able to say, I'm running late. Are you, can you feed the animals, or can you get something out of the, refrigerator, whatever? That is that teamwork. And ideally, I like couples to see us not as coming together as a team. The two of you are coming together to take care of your own needs, but each other's needs, relationships, and in any good working unit, if things don't feel right or equitable, or then we have conversations about it. This is not tied, not tied to only long-term couples, but there is some kind of a red flag I'd love to share with you, Valeria, and your audience, if at all possible, so they can maybe keep it in their mind. Okay. One of the red flags that I see is when we're keeping score. All right. And it's the good. A green flag is that we're keeping score on all the good things they do. Oh, they do this. And like you said, my husband, he's so good. He lets me know where he's going and we're having this conversation. So that would be keeping score in a great way. But typically when folks start to come to me, there's a whole list of rebuilding resentments and things that they let me down or they didn't do right or whatever it might be. And that list becomes our reality. And then in building that red flag list, what we're missing out is the green flags. And that might be keep me in touch, or letting you know, hey, my plans have changed. I'm going to be gone longer, or whatever it might be. So if you are sitting in your relationship, or you're feeling like your partner in your relationship or spouse has this long list or laundry list of things you do wrong or how you're letting them down, that's a big place to stop and start figuring out, what is it? Is it me? Is it them? Is it the list? Because what we focus on, we tend to see. What we don't focus on, we tend to miss.
Oh my gosh, yes, that's so true. You couldn't have said it better. And it's funny, like in our earlier years of our relationship, honestly, I think we both may have been guilty of doing that, as I think many people might be. And it's like, as you were saying, like that's all you can focus on is all of the negative things. Like, so you lose sight of any of like those green things, those positive things that they're doing. And so you're just hyper focused on, they did this and this and this wrong. And that's all you think about. And how would you maybe advise anyone to maybe kind of take a step back from that and reevaluate?
Right. And when we're looking for these things and we find evidence to support our bias or our perspective. And so we're missing out on those missed opportunities. Like when I use a good example for me, it works for me, is like, I'm sort of oblivious to cars and what people are driving or what styles are out there. There are some people that are huge car fans, right? But when it's time for us to start talking about or looking for cars, and we've chatted about a new little, I want to say like SUV-ish kind of thing, and someone will mention a Toyota or a this or a that, and I'm like, oh, I have no idea. So then maybe they'll show me a picture, or we're out driving, someone pointed out, see that? That's what I was talking about. That's a Subaru Outback. Oh, okay. All of a sudden, I start seeing a whole bunch of Subaru Outbacks. And all of a sudden, I also start seeing, oh, look, there's a Ford Explorer. There's a Ford this, there's a this. It increases our awareness at things that I was just filtering past. And humans are designed to do that. We have so much to visually see. We do, honestly, biologically prioritize, and a lot of stuff drops to the side. It happens in our relationships too.
That is so true. And I like that you use the car analogy, because like just recently I'm like, oh my gosh, there are so many white Teslas on the road. And then all I see now are white Teslas.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Elon. Right? He's a good guy. But yeah, there's a ton, right? And it's very unique. So once you start locking on, you start paying attention, you start walking, even going through a shopping, parking lot, and like, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, wow, there's a silver one. Ooh, break. Right. And so understand you're not a bad person and they're not a bad person. Some of it is just how we are wired up in our brains for survival standpoints, how getting into some of these shortcuts in a relationship is important to having a successful life. If you're consistently wondering who's going to do dinner or what's this, then you live in this state of arousal and bumping into each other. So it is healthy to have these routines and things, but it is also healthy to times to look at it and say, when do we need to go back to some of the early years and get curious, or what isn't working for me anymore? No.
Absolutely.
Before kids, I call it BC, before children. Before children, right. There was a lot more flexibility. There was a whole lot more, ain't no big deal, leftovers or,
Yeah, I definitely know, like, for us, we have 6 cats, and
yay.
sometimes that's a big job.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We have 2 cats and 3 dogs right now, which is kind of small other things. And yeah, it's the 6. And they're just even doing head count on them. Like, where are they sleeping and who's inside? Or I don't know if yours get to go outside.
Yeah, for sure. That's a big job, just coming or going. Yeah, the head count.
Mm-hmm. At least it is in our world. But yeah, so it's before even having cat number 1 was a whole different, let's say, level of diligence and upkeep. When you have 6 cats and litter boxes and food and kibbles and cat treats and all kind of things, that, it changes the game a little bit. And so our lives get a little busier. We get busier careers or more demanding careers, or we shift into different roles. And it's important to talk about these natural life transitions and what's working and what isn't working.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because, like, my husband and I have talked ad nauseum about, like, when and if to have kids. And I think that's a big one for so many people because, like, we've been together a long time, especially before having kids. So that would be like a huge life change. What would you say are some of the most difficult things that maybe couples go through in having that transition, and any advice for someone who might be maybe starting that journey maybe later on in their relationship?
Okay. Starting to have children or working on having children. Okay. Wow. Yeah. It's a big thing, right? Well, our life is filled with so many different life transitions, and these are normal and, guys, to be embraced for some of them. I don't know. We even talk about menopause or gray hair. We'll talk about other things like that. But, when you have come together, let's say having children, and you've been together in a relationship for a while, it's mentally, I don't think we're prepared for the amount of great things that happen with having children, as well as I want to say the challenges of having children. You think about being tired or, exhausted after a long day. And then we're talking coming home and having to show up on, all hands on deck. And what does that look like? So deciding to have children is something you sit down and you chit chat about. It is not like you can babysit your way to know that you really want to be a parent.
Yeah.
All right. You're borrowing somebody else's child, for one thing. I have a lot of people that, well, we've been babysitting my nieces and nephews, and we hate them, not in a bad way, but they're just, they don't follow the rules, and they, my such and such is too easy on them. Okay. Babysitting is really great. That's wonderful to see if you have some kind of interest or pique or curiosity. But understand it's somebody else's kid, and that child is being raised by on their schedules and their rules. So when you bring your own children into the world, whether you adopt or you know have them your own biological children, those children are going to fit into the routine and the structure or the flexibility of your marriage, of your relationship, your household. So sitting down and saying, okay, let's have children. What's that involve? You start talking about more, what do you want? What kind of parent do you want to be? What kind of things do you want to do differently than maybe that your parents did or that you grew up watching? If you're a father, what life lessons do you want to give to your children? And it just evolves. I mean, it really, really just evolves as they get older. And as you get older and you get wiser, it's as a mom, what are some of the things that you want to pass on to your kids? What kind of daughter do you want to raise? What kind of son do you want to raise? Because even the gender of your child changes these unspoken, I would say, roles or rules, dreams that we have. And, you know, for us personally, we had 2 daughters. So we really wanted to teach them how to think for themselves, how to be strong and confident with themselves, to have good educations, have good careers so that you wouldn't have to be financially or emotionally dependent on another man. But at the same time, being able to be loving and want to step into that relationship or marriage. And we're luckily that's, you know, both of our daughters are in that place and they have wonderful guys and we call them our sons. But that was a mantra. We tell, and they knew it, like, okay, what do you do before you get married? We go to school, we get a career. Like, yeah, you're right. You got it. But our dream, if we had 1 daughter and 1 son, or we had 2 sons, probably might look somewhat similar, but have some different aspects of it. Stepping into making the decision to be a parent also means having a good sense of humor. I want to say creating a place, a space for each of you to talk about when something they did doesn't match with you, or when you feel like you haven't shown up as well as you need to. And by that, I want to say that we probably have people that are going to tell us all about their pregnancies, all about their struggles or successes. They're probably going to have well-meaning in-laws and friends. They're going to tell us what we should do and how we should be raising our kids. What should we buy or not buy? The couple needs to come together and say, we need to have a place and some boundaries around, say, the in-laws that tell us how to do, or the friends that want to butt in, and how do we do that? And so it is really being open to advice, but also being able to say thank you, but no thank you. The mother-in-law that wants to be part of the birthing experience, like nobody's showing up, but myself, myself, the baby, and
right.
and my hubby or wife or whatever type of thing, and the doctors. That's who's going to be in there, and people can get all offended. I hear so many stories about couples that select their baby's names and then they share it with the family, and people that say, oh, that's a terrible name.
Oh.
No. What about, you don't aunt, whatever, 3 generations back, you're supposed to use her name or your dad's name or something. And so you're going to get all sorts of feedback. And so part of it is like, thank you, but this is our kid, and to see yourself as a team. One little story I'll tell too about what they didn't tell me. Okay. What I didn't know, and I wish I had known. And it's for me, this was me personally. And it was one of my slipping to the depths of, oh, no. So a lot of folks say, well, Liz, you don't make these mistakes or something because you studied it. Yeah, studying it and listening and working with people and applying it. Even the best of the best are human and we fall. So one particular time it wasn't one particular time, but after my daughter was first born and she was round the clock nursing and feeding and stuff like that. I was tired. Of course, I had a C-section instead of what I thought I was going to have. This perfectly planned, here's the last day of work. I'd have a week to tidy up the house, and then I'd go into labor and deliver the baby magically, right? Easy. Didn't go that way. But so here we are, post all of that expectation, and I'm tired. So my husband's asleep and the baby's crying. So I kick my husband awake, pretending to be asleep. All right. So he gets up, doesn't say a word, just gets up, takes care of the baby, brings her back to my nurse. Okay. That worked. I'm thinking, I'm on to something. Tried it another night or two down the road. Did the same thing. Only this time he said, look, I know you're awake. I'm pretending to be asleep. I'm going to take care of the baby. I'm bringing her, but don't do it a third time. If you're tired, just simply say, honey, wake me up and tell me, honey, I'm tired. Can you go get the baby? And I'll do it. Like, communication, right? Clear communication. So even in that moment, in the middle of a 2 a.m. exhaustion, he showed the presence of mind and, compassion. But he also showed some boundaries and said, look, just do this and we'll be good. If you keep pretending like it's going to get bad. And so knowing that you have that space and that rapport to make mistakes or to sink to one of your lower, less glamorous moments, and they still love you and you can work around it, life goes on, is really huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of wanted to dial it back a little bit because you mentioned the opinions of others, especially with family and things like that, especially when you have kids. Everyone wants to come out and say, you should do it this way or do it that way. Or this is how I do this.
Yeah.
And I think so, opinions, especially within our families, are very prevalent. Families, friends. And
yes.
I think for anyone who's maybe early on in their marriage or relationship, I know for us, my husband and I, there was a lot of unsolicited opinions and advice. And I think when we were younger, before we really knew how to have really solid boundaries, I think it affected us a lot. So do you have any words of advice for anyone who might be early on in their relationship and, everyone wants to give their feedback or opinion and how to not let that affect your relationship?
Okay, right. And first, I guess recognizing that it's your marriage, it's your relationship. Right? It's not they don't get to make the rules, and it is simply an opinion or obviously a preference on their place. If you can get ahead of some of the family dynamics and understanding hey, my mom tends to be pretty intrusive, or she always wants to come and point out everything that's wrong. Okay. But since it's my mom, I'm going to have a word with her type of thing. So the person who is biologically tied to that special opinion person, or it's their friend group, they really kind of get to run first redirect to those folks. So maybe, hey, mom, look, I know you mean well, but we're going to do X, Y, or Z. Or if if you have an opinion, kind of keep it to yourself. We have that kind of, sometimes people have those kind of dialogues. Whether you're going to have a child or not have a child, people are going to have some kind of input, and whether you're doing things right or not doing things. You have a baby too soon. You wait too long. I mean, Valerie, you have 6 cats, right? I'm sure there's somebody in the world going, 6 cats? Yeah. Oh my goodness. Right. So that is so cool. How do you do that? We have 2. And so understanding that just because someone has that opinion doesn't mean it makes them right. And you have just as much right and actually more in your relationship or marriage. They appreciate that, but we've got it handled. And that's kind of what, if you can do it hey, thanks, I appreciate that, but we're gonna, spank our kid, or we're gonna, not with belts or anything, but some people are, we're still gonna spank our kids, or we're not gonna spank our kids. We're gonna put them on timeout, or we're gonna have these kind of conversations with them. Whatever you and your spouse or your sweetheart decide, that becomes the overarching. And if, let's say my mom is one of those critical, always giving inputs. If I told my hubby to just play along with her so we don't have to, do, and she's criticizing my hubby or she's criticizing that, then what I'm doing is I'm being pulled out of the role of being a supportive spouse and I'm being brought into this dynamic or he's throw him to the wolves. Yeah. So he has a couple things. He can be odd man out and continue to be difficult or play with the kids too rough. Let's play something easy. Play with the kids too rough. You shouldn't let them, tickle or throw them in the air kind of thing. So he becomes the bad guy, or he becomes the one that has to get angry and push back. Then he looks poor in that. So we really want to try to see those things from our partner's perspective, see them from ourselves as an adult and not that kid. And whether it's a best friend, a cousin, a grandparent, you can politely for love to say, thank you. I appreciate that's good advice. I'm going to, let's say my hubby and I have already talked about it. But so we are not going to spank, but they're going to have timeouts, but I understand where you're coming from and how that worked for you guys. All right. So you can, and you can come and then push back. It may get to the point where like that conversation's closed. Right.
Yeah.
The more the two of you come together and support each other, because that really is when you say, I do, or we're committed, that's where your alliance is. And when you kind of go in that, like, it makes it easier. And it starts to create a very nice, let's say, fence or boundary. So as your children grow up in that, they may start to, that old grandma that's always picking things up. If she's been given the free run without any kind of redirects, then when it comes time for the kids to be hanging out with grandma, she's like, oh, hey, I know your mom and your mom and dad are really fanatics about no candy. So just between you and I'm going to go ahead, don't say anything, but here's grandma's candy stitch, and, and I think it's always so that's something benign, but you know what I mean? It's like, so that the grandma knows best and life isn't good if you don't have candy, what type of thing. And that's undermining you guys as parents. And so input from people is ultimately end of the day, you want to make sure that you're meeting your needs, your husband or spouse or partner's needs or wife's needs, and you guys are in alignment, or even if you aren't aligned, you've agreed to disagree, and this is the way it's going to be handled.
Absolutely. And I also like how you mentioned, like, when it comes to setting that boundary, that the biological relative, maybe it's like the husband's mom or whatever, setting that boundary. And it's funny because earlier on in our relationship, I, as many people do, like if there's something that bothered me that maybe one of my husband's relatives had said to me, I would tell him, and he's like, well, why don't you just tell them, like that. And I'm like, yeah, like, I don't think it's going to be received as well coming from me versus coming from you. Like, although I know what you mean, and I'm glad that you're comfortable with that. But I'm like, I really think that you need to set that boundary. And it's funny because it's one of the things that like we had discussed with the couples therapist is about that, because it's like, yeah, if I say something to them, then I'm going to just look like the bad guy.
Right. Absolutely. and you do look like the bad guy, or you look like the difficult, spouse, you are. I know she's a troublemaker, but and I'm glad you brought that up from a personal perspective. I had a couple client, and she started talking to me about that her mother-in-law, she and her husband were trying to have children, and they've been trying for quite some time. And she had some medical issues that were really making it difficult. And so it was also their private business, and they weren't sharing all the medical stuff. That's not anybody else's business, right? So she was getting, like, let's say, ambushed or cornered when they go to family events or even a meal or something. And the mother-in-law would kind of like, so when are you guys having children? A benign question, and boy, it's been, a year or so. What's holding this up? And so the nice, daughter-in-law said, well, we're working on it, but things don't always happen immediately. She said, well, what's wrong? And that made the daughter-in-law feel very uncomfortable. It was really none of her mother-in-law's business. But this behavior kept. She said, well, I'd rather not talk about it. It's just something between, my husband and I and our doctors kind of thing, but know that it's still on the table. And it got to a point where the topic was only brought up, and this mother-in-law would call her repeatedly when the husband wasn't around. So she had said to her, what should we do? So look, talk to your husband. And so she did. And they came up with a plan, and he reached out to his mom and his dad, and his dad was mentor, and said, here's the deal. This is private for us, and it's something that we're really working on. We love you. It's very important to us to see if we can have a child, but it also is very stressful. These tests and the waiting is not fun. And maybe it was easier for you guys, or maybe there was less options. But for us, we're working on it, and we appreciate that you don't ask those questions anymore. And mom, if you do have a question, or you're curious, or you see something new in the news that you think might be helpful, just send it to me. So I'm your son, send it to me, and then I'll share. So he ran interference.
Yeah.
And so he said some real stuff, and it was loving. Nobody had to yell and scream and stuff like that or anything like that. It was loving. It was straight to the point, but very clearly everybody knew that he was now, that telephone tree. and the dad was like, I know, I keep telling her, back off. It's none of her business. So dad was, so then he said, hey, Dad, that was his opening. Dad, will you help me, continue to talk to mom about this, and, try to help her respect us and our privacy. He says, you got it. So now I had to buy in on everybody. Mom still was like waiting, do I start knitting booties or whatever type of thing? But it really helps to have those conversations. It's pretty unrealistic to have the non-biological part of that marriage or that relationship be able to set a hard boundary without looking like they're the bad guy. If you're fortunate enough to have a open, receptive in-laws like the guy's dad, she probably would have she would have been able to have the conversation once with him. He said, hey, you got it. I am so sorry. I was just excited. I won't bring it up again. That's what she would have gotten.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of thinking about, I want to go back to when we think about resentment and relationships. What role does maybe forgiveness play in the healing process, and how might you encourage couples to kind of maybe work through those past hurts?
Forgiveness is huge. And a lot of times we forgive, but we don't forget. All right. Well,
Right.
I get that. Forgiveness is really recognizing that we're all human and we make mistakes. And of course, we're talking a whole range of what to forgive, right? Between forgetting my birthday or versus, having an affair. There's a whole level of different levels of healing and things. But if you're the one that has stepped out and have done the faux pas, like for me, like pretending to wake my husband up, well, that was deceptive and not too kind. It's really owning up to it. And it doesn't mean you don't have to beat yourself up, but it really needs to mean that it's recognizing that what I've done has hurt you. A repair, for me to let go of something, it helps the other person to acknowledge or know that my feelings were hurt or is disappointed or whatever it might be. And those are sometimes really tough conversations to have, but they're also very critical and important. So it is also important if you're looking for forgiveness from someone, the other person may not realize you need more from them or that you need anything at all. They may think that, look, I said I was sorry. I'm not going to do that anymore. I won't have you worried and up all night. I will call you if I'm running late. Let's go back to, running late from being out at the party with the guys type of thing. I won't keep you up. And I think it's all done and said. But what we haven't done maybe is really check in and say, is that, are you okay with that? What's, what do I need to be doing? If we take let's say the wife, that's ladies, what is it? We'll take the wife whose hubby has maybe went out for a big business dinner and then they got to drinking, they got to hanging out with some more deals and they didn't let us know. And we're expecting them home like at 10 or 11. And now it's 1 or 2 in the morning. Our head may go all over the place. And they're like, look, I'm sorry, it was work. I won't do it again. I'll keep you posted. I'll make sure that I set a timer. I won't have my phone on silence. The guys might think that this husband may think that he's met all the needs. He's checked the box. But what he's forgetting is that when we go to make an apology or we're trying to talk to someone, we need to first acknowledge their feelings. Before he did any of all the solutions, phone on, all that type of things. He needed to acknowledge the other person's feelings, his wife's feelings or spouse's feelings. And so when we're making an apology, or repair or trying to heal, first we want to hit the feelings. How did you feel? You can say, I can only guess that maybe you were scared and that I was dead on the side of the road or that I might be up to some bad thing or whatever. If we don't know how the other person's feeling, we can say, like, you seem very angry or you seem really, really upset with me. What are you feeling right now? How have I hurt you? What were you worried about? We get curious and we start asking questions. For some people, let's say that wife, maybe she lost someone in a car accident and this was a trigger. It's late at night. The weather's kind of bad. Her husband's 3 hours late, haven't heard from him. He's not answering his phone. And she's thinking the worst. For others, it may be, maybe they came from a history of people that were stepping out on them. And so they're thinking, oh, great, he's met somebody and he's off to no good. And that would be the farthest thing from her spouse or her sweetheart's mind or partner's mind. But that's where she goes and triggers. So to forgive, we first need to understand how we've hurt the person or what emotions has that brought up in the other person. We repair that. We apologize that. We don't get into all the explanations until after that's happened. And then we can say, here's some of the things I think I could do differently. Now we're coming in solutions and they're going to be more receptive to hearing it and more open to it. If we flip that equation around and come up with solutions first, we tend to feel, if we're on the receiving end, minimized, ignored, and still unfinished.
Yeah, absolutely. I think honestly, acknowledging partner's feelings is really the key, because like my husband and I, when we've had arguments in the past, there's depending on what the situation was, and sometimes on my side, is like there's been things that maybe he can't do anything about, like, I don't know, like one time he broke something of mine and he was afraid to tell me because I was upset, and that part was on me. And then it kind of dialing it back to where, like, on one hand, there's nothing like else that he can do with, like, besides that, like, I on my side have to realize, okay, like he is genuinely sorry. And so like I have to like go through that process of kind of like not like holding a grudge or resentment. Like I have to kind of like learn to let go of, genuinely sorry like that, because that's like all he can do. He can't undo it. Right. And so, yeah, I think also it's like important to, depending on the situation, to where, depending on the situation, if it's, I'm sorry, and genuinely, of course, be sorry, not like, if you're in the heat of the moment, well, I'm sorry, or,
yes,
and that's not really helpful. yeah, genuinely be sorry about it. And then also like outline like what, I'm going to do differently going
Mm-hmm.
forward. I think it is really helpful in kind of navigating that apology and being able to
Right.
both of you move forward.
Right. And I know we're trying to live it. I guess one of the success tips to me is like having regular ongoing conversations, then the good, the bad, so that we are practiced having hard conversations or uncomfortable conversations, but we're also practiced in giving conflict, like, compliments or saying, hey, I really like this, but could you do this a little different? It's like a muscle, and we want to be exercising that with each other and within the relationship. So when something big happens, it's not like, oh, in trouble now. I'm going to the principal's office, right? And so it makes it bigger and scarier, you know, all that kind of stuff. Also, just let them know, hey, can we talk about the other night when you didn't get home until X, Y, or Z? And that way they have time to think about it and they're not feeling surprised. And so they can give you the time and consideration and the repair that you need.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that too, because especially when we're thinking about triggers, like for me, like if my husband's maybe raised his voice to me in the past, it's triggering
Mm-hmm.
for me, very loud, sudden noises because of my dad yelling when I was a kid. And
Mm-hmm.
I think once I learned to identify why I got the reaction, like, because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
raising their voice to me, my reaction is to like to do it back, and like I get kind
Yes.
of in this defensive mode, and so now I'm able to kind of separate myself from that and be like, hey, when you raised your voice to me, that really reminded me when I was a child and was afraid because my dad was yelling, and being able to pull
Mm-hmm.
back. And I feel like that has elicited a more understanding response, and like, okay, that like for my husband, for example, he's like, yeah, definitely that wasn't my intention to do
Mm-hmm.
that. And so we kind of talk through rather than
Mm-hmm.
suddenly get reacting, and then it's kind of like in the spiral usually, and
Yeah.
it escalates, so
Yeah.
I found
That's
that's
our, yeah, we want to de-escalate and keep things because nobody wants to. That's the last thing we want to do is have that. Everyone wants to be zen and get
yeah.
along. And so the more we can front load and not have those oopses, or even just be able to more practice the other way, like, whoa, I think we're getting off topic here. Or let's take the time out and let's chat some more, another time. It's okay to put a pin in it and let it set. In fact, that's really helpful. Let everybody get calmer, have a chance to absorb what was said or what wasn't said, and then come back at it.
Yeah. And I know for me and my husband personally, like we went through a journey like when we were probably about 5 to 10 or so years ago, where we went through a lot of like, I'll probably just say trials and
Mm-hmm.
tribulations, I guess, as they say, and a lot of difficulties, to where we were at a point where maybe we were thinking about getting a divorce, and it was a very, very difficult time. And
Yeah.
it took a lot of time to kind of navigate that and work through that, because we
Mm-hmm.
were at a point where we really felt like it was going to end. And I wanted to kind of think, like, for anyone who might be going through something similar,
Mm-hmm.
but like wants to really work on repairing the relationship, maybe, if the partners have drifted apart, they want to rediscover the love and the intimacy that kind of brought them together. What would you advise someone who might be going through that and they want to kind of reconnect with their partner?
They start kind of drifting apart type of thing. They start
Yeah.
before they hit that divorcing or kind of
Yeah.
okay. Well, recognize first thing is that it happens to the best of us, all of us. Second thing is that there's an average 6.9 years before a couple goes and really reaches out and says, hey, we need some help. And so realize that you guys have been drifting apart for a while and you're in this routine and there's this rut. And so it may take an objective insight into it. It may take more of like intentional efforts where you sit down and say, hey, I'm just not feeling it as much as we had anymore in the past. Right. And so needing some I'm needing some things to be different. And so we start talking about what was different. I like to have couples go back to the early days. Think about in the early days, what was great? What did you love about them? What were the fun ways? How did you date? What was, because in those early days, that's where the fun was, and that's where the spark and energy is. And we can go back to some of those things. One couple I had that they met through music, and they really bonded through singing and dancing and going to bands and those things. And at the time while we're on, they didn't have any music playing in their house. It's one of the questions I asked them. And when they reintroduced music, they played it in the morning, they played in the afternoon. They were a completely changed, different couple. You could look at them and they were smiling and it was more energetic. Just, yeah, we're cooking and we'll swirl around, do the dance kind of thing in the kitchen. And so it really brought back some of those fun memories. So as a couple that's starting to drift apart, realize this happens to all of us, all relationships. We even drift apart from ourselves. We get caught up in the busyness. And so if you want to do something different, then part of this is saying, hey, what can we do? Because I love you, but I'm not knowing that if I'm in love with you. And you maybe, or I'm feeling a little disconnected. How do we get more intentional? You get curious. You go back to the early days. You look at how you're showing up. Are you putting in some energy to make yourself get cleaned up? Or are you still wearing the old, pajamas from 10 years ago type of thing? Are we taking them for granted? And again, like we talked about the manners, do we need to actually really go talk to somebody? Or there's lots of really good courses that you can do. It's showing up and putting that effort in. I have a lot of folks that go into my weekend reconnect because it goes through some very specific skills and strategies that help them be successful. It also uncovers some of the things that maybe we learned incorrectly or missed. When you go home or you go out, where's your phone? A lot of times people nowadays, their cell phone gets more FaceTime than their spouse or their partner. Yeah. So some people park their electronics or have a no TV or whatever it might be. And I guess one other thing is doing something physical, fun, and novel is a big, quick enthusiasm and energy boost. And researchers did it with something so lame as obstacle course, and they measure people before and after. And as these couples went through a obstacle course, they came back and their relationship satisfaction jumped in statistically significant, really good, just by doing something that was novel and out of character for them. So drifting apart may mean you're in a rut and a routine, and it's hard to think of yourself or your partner in any other light. So let's get out of our comfort zones and do something together.
I love that because it's like, that's honestly, it's been monumental in my relationship as well. And kind of going back to when thinking about like, what made me fall in love with this person and what did we enjoy doing? And honestly, it's been amazing to kind of incorporate those changes and doing things that we both love and kind of going, I guess, back to basics and in a way. And sometimes I feel like along the way, especially like when we have like those outside opinions, like it can kind of lead us astray because we're so focused on like based on others' opinions, like what we think we should want and what we think that we should be doing rather than focusing on like what I want, what does my partner want? And then of course our goals together. And kind of thinking about that before we kind of close out, would like to ask what maybe inspired you to specialize in helping couples reconnect and repair their relationships?
Thanks. Well, I know that both professionally as a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as personally living it and watching, families, I've watched my couples go through things, and I really realized that therapy itself was doing couples a disservice because we went back in and we talked about repeating the old hurts. The therapy container had people showing up once a week. We talked about the problems, so we wouldn't come up with a solution, or we didn't have time to do the repair, and off they went. And so the fights really happen in real life outside of the therapy session. And so I wanted to have folks realize you don't have to be discouraged and there's nothing wrong with you. And so the coaching container is really where it works best with couples, because we focus on their strengths. These are the things that are great about you. These are the things that are great about your partner. These are the things that are great about your relationship. And then we go, but here's the gaps. Here's the area of opportunities. And I give them skills and strategies, techniques to apply that's directly to them. And when you get that kind of momentum, you start to see that change, all of a sudden our perception or perspective of the relationship starts to change, and we start enjoying ourselves with the other person, and we start anticipating good things instead of old problems. And so I was really tired of, seeing people tell me they've been to multiple therapists or they've been in, couples therapy for years and years and years. And, it's the last ditch. We're going to divorce. And like, no. So that's what brought me into it and really focused. And so it's a pleasure to see such hardworking, wonderful people come together and have that aha and relax and start to enjoy themselves. Plus, whether it's they have critters at home or they have kids, they are setting an example and they're showing up differently. And the whole vibe of the house is different. They're teaching their children better communication skills and how to have good peer relationships and setting the groundwork for better, more intimate relationships.
Yeah, that is so true, especially like when we think about communication. I think communication, I know for us, it's been a big thing. And I'm sure that is for many couples and our listeners who, I think a lot of people struggle with communication. And I think it's pretty much like probably maybe the top thing, maybe one of the top 3 things that people struggle with. And if you can nail communication, I mean, like, especially if you have kids at home and anyone who's observing, I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. It was fun.
I really appreciate you joining me. And I honestly, I love these types of discussions and topics, anything marriage and family relationships. I think like, even like for us being together so long, there's always something that I'm learning. And, as our lives, there's always something new that we can learn or be better at. So I really appreciate your discussion and your insights. But before we close out, would you be able to share with our listeners where they can find you and learn more about what you do and connect with you?
Sure. So on, whether you're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, actually even a little bit on TikTok, I'm at Dr. Liz Jenkins, and you can click there. I've got lots of free resources for people, such as love languages, so you don't have to read the book, although the book's really good, but you can hop right through it, to my couples connection checklist, which is a great foundational how you can have that routine so you don't get disconnected, or my website, which is drlizjenkins.com. And I can talk to you a little bit more about my coaching programs with the Couples Smart Restart, which it's a sprint and it gets people and that enthusiasm and that motivation right away. But I'd love to have people just connect, follow me, say hi. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I do have a complimentary couples connection call for 30 minutes. We'll hop on there and kind of troubleshoot what might be going on for you in your world and your relationship, and then how I can help or what suggestions I might have for you.
Awesome. I know I'll definitely be connecting with you after this as well. So really appreciate you sharing that with us, and I'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. You take care.
All right. Thank you. You too.